an interesting weekend with special congress at Páirc Uí Chaoimh and some key decisions that were arrived at when all was said and done there. I suppose the primary one being that the Tier 2 Championship is going to be introduced from 2020, so from next year. It involves Division 3 and 4 teams, unless they've made their provincial final, at which point they'll make their way into the Sam Maguire competition. It needed 60% to pass, and at 1 over 75% of the vote, positions are going to be determined at the end of the National Football League next year, so not the current standings. It'll be at the end of the 2020 league rather than the 2019 positions. The other things that arose: sin bin is in place now in place of the black card. That'll be 10 minutes in the bin and subs going back to 5 from 6, so the sin bin there. The advance mark that moved the kick out only to any kicks taken from outside the 45 to inside the 45, still clean catches and still has to travel 20 metres to kick, that is, and all kick outs to be taken from the 20 metre line, which is up from the 13 metre line. So there were the decisions that were arrived at. I guess the main one, Paul, we've been discussing slightly already, the introduction of the Tier 2 Championship from 2020. You've already set out your stall in that. I think I'm right to summarise to say, and feel free to interject here at any point, that you're not necessarily wholly against the Tier 2 Championship. Your questioning is in relation to, I suppose, how rushed this is, because the Fixtures Review Committee are on the brink, it seems, of coming back with their recommendations, which it seems from the bits and pieces of accounts, I mean, I'm sure there's been a few kites flown out there to see what the reaction to it would be, but it seems what we're going to have is 4 different conferences broken up roughly by for geographical reasons that are going to have 8 teams each. So that seems like it's coming in the pipeline. It seems like it might be a half-decent idea. So I guess why the rush is probably one of the biggest questions out of this.
Why the rush again? If you look at it, a Tier 2 Championship is not new. 100 years ago there were junior championships at inter-county level. There was a Be All Ireland in the 90s and so on. So this is not a new idea. And this not new idea will fail again if it is left on its own as a thing and expected to do something. It cannot happen. It cannot work. It's not the way any sport.
Why won't it work?
Well, think it through. How does this help football in, for example, Waterford, in Wicklow, in whichever of the counties that are rooted at the bottom of Division 4 that you want to pick?
Because they'll suddenly have a bunch more games at teams that are close to their level. The door isn't fully shut, somewhat, but not fully shut to remaining in the Sam Maguire competition.
Every year those counties play games against teams at their own level, and it doesn't bring them on. The most successful time in which a range of teams came through in the GAA was when there was ended 10 years ago, when there was Division 1A and 1B, Division 2A and 2B, in which there were a mix of teams from across the 4 divisions were playing against each other. And you had new championship winners coming through, you had new league winners coming through year after year. And what you have now is essentially a product of a kind of, it's an unfair, in and of itself, this version that the GAA have come with is unfair, because it allows counties in different sizes of provincial championships different treatment, and so you design a system which is inequitous before you start is wrong. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the problems for football in counties that are currently unsuccessful are problems which are rooted in the quality of footballer that is being produced, in the coaching systems, in the competitive structures within the county, and that's, you know, you can't get away from that basic fact. You can't wish that away by creating a new tiered system. And third of all, what it does is it doesn't answer the basic question of the calendar, of a calendar where there are already county teams training in a season that will run till the end of August, the start of September next year.
I think I might say there's no details around the calendar of how this works yet.
There are no details. Even there are. It looks like the Fixtures Review Committee is going to frame up a range of proposals as to what should happen.
Okay, so entirely separate to this.
Entirely separate to this. It looks like that's what they're going to do. But why would you fundamentally change the structure of your championship when you don't know what its calendar is going to be? I don't understand that.
Unless, I mean, historically, the GAA do like a good 3-year sample size, right? And they'll introduce something for the 3-year period, and they'll say, right, let's take stock at the end of that. It doesn't. This seems as if it's just been brought in, and there's no sort of end point to it. It's going to be brought in next year. There isn't any.
John Horan referenced 2 counties in particular, Wicklow and Leitrim, as being huge proponents of this deal.
A lot of the Division 4 counties apparently were, by the way.
And all of the Division 3 counties, loads of Division 3 counties were entirely against it, and Division 4 counties such as Antrim, who have had absolute experience, and Carlow, who have had absolute experience of the Joe McDonagh Cup, spoke against it. Carlow are a brilliant example of a county who has made huge progress in football and hurling by virtue of the structures that they've put in place and the coaching that they're doing. They are against this. And that must say something, and they understand how the Joe McDonagh Cup, they understand that the All-Stars for the Joe McDonagh Cup, I'll be amazed if you did a straw poll now of who the All-Stars for the Joe McDonagh Cup are. I can't name them.
No, I'm just playing a bit of devil's advocate here. I'm not saying I completely agree with it at all, and to be honest, I'm not probably au fait with it enough, but I mean, are the GAA looking at, for example, a county like Tipperary that are a dual county that for a while there under Liam Kearns were doing really well in football, but let's say you have a young player coming up, a young boy, and if he sees the Tipperary Hurlers and they're winning Liam McCarthy, and he actually kind of prefers football, but he sees that's the dominant team, that's who I should go play with, but then they see the footballers, and if it's some of it for kids in particular, it's how you market it. So I know with Joe McDonagh and these Tommy Murphy Cups and everything, you know, they were kind of forgotten about by the media a little bit. You know, none of us, who can remember who even won them, but if they get to an All-Ireland final and it's played in Croke Park and it's marketed the right way, can that young boy, and he might be only 10, look up and say, well, Tipperary footballers were in an All-Ireland final in Croke Park as well, and they win, and then, you know, it might be an added incentive for him. Is this what they're trying to create? They're trying to create these finals, and I'm not saying it's the right image, but is that what they're trying to do? They're a bit like the way the club structure is. I mean, if you're in I'm from a small club, if your club was always going up against the Dr. Crokes, well, they haven't an absolutely ounce, and I know you can't equate the club game and the inter-county game, but are they just trying to stratify it that you are still being pushed outside your comfort zone with potentially an incentive? Because I know we're reading that if you win Tier 2, you're not necessarily in Tier 1 the following year if your league placing doesn't change, and if you don't win the following year's first round of the All-Ireland Championship. But are they trying to create
you're guaranteed it for the following year, but what you're not... Yeah, I take that point, right? That
what they're trying? Are they trying something?
Is it an idea of doing that? But my point is that you can try to do that, and you can market it to the ends of the earth, but the appetite amongst the public for a Tier 2 competition seems to me to be not there. I think there is already a tiered system in the league, and people like the league and they understand the league for what it is. But I suppose I know players, like the one thing about being in UCD is you see players coming from a whole load of different counties, and you know, really genuinely decent people who train really hard for both football and hurling, for weak counties and for strong counties, and who all absolutely love the games. But I've yet to meet one of them who did not want to measure themselves against the best.
Isn't that flawed though to begin with, Paul? Isn't that like we would have had over the years a bunch of players and coaches from the traditional sort of outside of Tier 2, let's say, counties involved, and this has come up time immemorial about the idea of a Tier 2 championship, and they will all say, that Tier 2 makes absolute sense, and so would you back that? Absolutely not. Is it not almost, and I appreciate the flaws in what I'm about to say, but that I do believe there's some truth in the idea that, like, leaning on those who are so heavily currently involved in it to drive the process being a flawed thing to begin with. Like, the players shouldn't be deciding that a Tier 2 championship shouldn't be introduced. Like, it might actually be the right thing for football to do that.
But are the players, I'm jumping straight in, but are the players even deciding? Because isn't another major issue? They're obviously one of the key stakeholders in this decision, and it's county board delegates, from my understanding, that, you know, their association have a much lower representation. And are the players even deciding? They're not. Are they even being asked? Are they being consulted genuinely?
Well, the Gaelic Players Association came out and said they were against it. what really interests me, of course, is that in all of this, once again, there is no thought for club players. So there are more inter-county matches being played, and to deny that this is when you don't call it a be all Ireland, when you call it a tiered system, it's to imagine that this is just the same thing, but it's just at a lower level for people who can't compete at the same thing. It's not. There's a Super 8s there for teams who play for the Sam Maguire. There's not at the lower level. It's just like, let's get them out of the way of a system, of a situation, and let the creation of the last 3 or 4 years is to create an elite in Gaelic football. That's the reality of it, where there are a group of teams who will compete on television for the biggest prize, and the rest of it just relegated to a backwater for where you will be forever stuck without those things I'm talking about of investment in coaching and in schools and in structures and in the club system. And there is no way in and of itself this can work. There is no way.